Hey there, fellow knowledge seekers. Ready for another deep dive with us? Today we're going to be unlocking a kind of secret code, the code of human behavior. It's fascinating. Sometimes perplexing. It's all about the ways we act, and interact out there in society. Get
Mm.
this, whether you're a UPSC aspirant or a student just diving deep into psychology, heck, even if you're just someone who's like endlessly curious about the world, understanding attitudes and behavior, it's like getting a superpower. Helps us navigate all the complexities of human interaction, right? With more awareness, more insight. Before we get started, yeah, just a quick reminder to like and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to click that bell icon so you never miss a chance to dive deep with us. All right, so in today's Deep Dives, Yaskower, we're going to explore this really powerful concept, attitude, and how it impacts, undeniable impact on our actions. The source material we're using for this one, it's packed with insights. We're talking everything from the very foundation of how attitudes are formed to that intricate, relationship between what we think and how we act.
We're even going to venture into some really intriguing realms. Things like moral attitudes, political attitudes.
Now.
Right? Oh, and yes, we're even going to touch on those infamous bureaucratic attitudes. And I know a topic that's especially relevant for our UPSC aspirants out there. Joining me on this journey, of course, is our expert, a master at connecting the dots and revealing the why behind the what. Yeah. Ready to embark on this fascinating exploration with us?
Absolutely. I think this deep dive will be particularly enlightening, especially for those who are really interested in understanding how those individual attitudes actually play out on a larger scale, shaping the social and political landscapes.
Okay, so let's start with something we can all kind of relate to, right? Think about your daily life for a second. Have you ever, stopped and wondered why you react a certain way in a specific situation? Or why you have, a really strong opinion about something when somebody else might feel totally different?
That's a great starting point. Our source material defines attitude as a settled way of thinking or feeling about something. And it has this evaluative feature to it, meaning it's either positive, negative, or neutral. It's more than just a fleeting emotion, though. It's like a deeply ingrained pattern of thought. And it really colors how we see the world. And as we're going to explore, influences how we actually act within it.
Right. And this source, it uses a really relatable example, your attitude towards health.
Yeah.
Some people, they embrace healthy eating and exercise like it's their life's mission. And others, well, not so much. And it goes way beyond just willpower, right? It's about that underlying attitude. It's a complex mix, beliefs, emotions, even past experiences, all shaping their perspective.
That's exactly where the ABCs of attitude come into play. It's a framework our source material uses to kind of unpack all those components of attitude. Think of them like the building blocks: cognitive, affective, and behavioral.
Okay, let's break those down.
Mm.
At first glance, they sound a little, textbooky, but I have a feeling you're going to make them crystal clear for us.
Not at all. So think of the cognitive component as your thoughts and beliefs about something. Let's use a classic example.
Okay.
Snakes. If you think snakes are dangerous, that's the cognitive part of your attitude towards them. It's like all the information you hold, the stories you've heard, the things you've learned that shape your perception, right?
Got it. So it's the mental picture you have, the thinking part of the whole equation. What about the affective component then?
That's where your feelings and emotions come in. Still thinking about snakes, okay? If even the thought of a snake sends shivers down your spine or makes you feel uneasy, well, that's the affective part of your attitude. It's that visceral emotional response you have to the object of your attitude.
Makes sense. So cognitive is the thought, affective is the feeling. So where does behavioral fit in all this? Is that about how we actually act?
Exactly. The behavioral component is all about your actions or tendencies to act in a certain way towards whatever the target of your attitude is. So you avoid snakes because you think they're dangerous and they make you feel scared. Well, that avoidance, that's the behavioral part of your attitude, is how your beliefs and feelings show up in your actions.
Wow, that's fascinating. It's like a chain reaction almost. Our thoughts trigger feelings, which then influence how we act. But what I find really intriguing is that our attitudes, they're not just random, right? They're actually shaped by a whole web of influences.
Absolutely. Our source material goes into how our attitudes are formed, and it really emphasizes the role of learning by association, especially during those formative years, childhood and adolescence. We're like sponges, absorbing attitudes from the people around us, particularly family and friends. It's like an unspoken curriculum almost. where we learn not just facts, but ways of seeing the world, interacting with it.
Oh, yeah, I totally get that. Growing up in a family that loves spicy food, like, I can practically handle a chili pepper like it's nothing. But it goes way beyond just family, right? I mean, there are other influential figures in our lives, too.
Definitely. The source material highlights the impact of teachers, friends, even the media, all playing a role in shaping our attitudes. It uses this really vivid example. Imagine a teenager, and she wins, like a Miss Good Health title because she's dedicated to practicing yoga. Well, that recognition, that external validation, it can actually solidify her positive feelings towards yoga, reinforcing that positive attitude.
That's a great example. It shows how external factors, from social rewards to, like, media messages, can really weave their way into our own internal belief systems.
Precisely. And it's not just about individual attitudes either. These patterns of thinking and feeling, they extend to how we interact with larger systems, institutions, That's where we get into the fascinating realms of political attitudes. And even, get this, bureaucratic attitudes perspectives that shape how we engage with power structures. Governance. The very fabric of society, really.
Yeah.
And this is where our deep dive gets, even more interesting, okay? Our source material, it digs into the structure of attitudes, like how those positive and negative evaluations remember the affective component. They're actually organized within that, cognitive, affective, and behavioral framework we've been talking about. It's like,
Wow.
we're uncovering the hidden architecture of our beliefs, our feelings,
Wait, hold on. Our attitudes have a structure, like a blueprint. Inside our minds. Tell me more. This is getting really interesting.
It is fascinating, right? Our source material, it presents two main perspectives, okay, on attitude structure. The first one is called the one-dimensional perspective. Basically, it suggests that positive and negative elements, they're like on opposite ends of a single continuum. Imagine a scale, right? On one side, you've got extreme positivity, and on the other, you've got extreme negativity. So in this view, if you have like a super strong positive attitude about something, you're less likely to also have any negative beliefs about it or even feelings.
So it's like a spectrum then. You're either leaning towards one side or the other. No room for like mixed feelings. Kind of like a love it or hate it thing.
Exactly. But then there's this other perspective, the two-dimensional one. This one proposes that, get this, the positive and negative elements, they actually exist on like two totally separate dimensions, which makes things way more nuanced because, it means you can have a mix of both. Positive and negative feelings towards the same thing.
Oh, that is interesting. So it's not a simple either-or situation then. You can have both positive and negative feelings about something, like swirling around at the same time.
Precisely. Think of it more like a grid, not just a single line, So you can be high in positivity about something, but also high in negativity towards it all at the same time. And our source material, it emphasizes this point, that this two-dimensional view, it really acknowledges that complexity, even the contradictions we often have in our attitudes, right?
That makes so much sense. I've totally felt that internal tug of war, when you're feeling both drawn to something and repelled by it all at once. Like, maybe I love how convenient online shopping is, but I also feel kind of guilty about the environmental impact of all those deliveries. It's like my head saying one thing and my heart saying something totally different.
A perfect example. That internal struggle you're describing, that's the two-dimensional perspective playing out in real life. It reminds us that our attitudes are multi-layered, They're shaped by a whole bunch of thoughts, feelings, and past experiences.
Okay, so we've got the ABCs of attitude, right?
Yeah.
And now we've explored how they're structured, how those positive and negative evaluations are like organized within our minds. But what I'm really curious about is like the connection to our behavior. Does having a positive attitude about something mean you'll always act in a way that reflects that? Or can our actions sometimes, completely contradict our beliefs?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And our source material dives deep into the relationship between attitude and behavior. It really stresses that it's not always a direct link. It's not like think positive and you'll magically act positive.
So there's no guarantee. More to it than that.
Exactly. There are actually a bunch of factors that influence whether our attitudes, whether they actually turn into consistent actions.
Okay, like what? Spill the beans. What are those factors?
Well, for starters, the strength of the attitude matters a lot. The stronger the attitude, like those deep-seated beliefs and convictions, the more likely they are to actually drive your actions. But weaker attitudes, the ones that are more surface level, they might not have as much influence on your day-to-day behavior.
That makes sense. If you're like really passionate about a cause, you're more likely to, volunteer your time or donate money or even speak out in support of it, right? But if you're only kind of mildly interested in something, might not do much about it.
Exactly. And the source material also points out the importance of attitude accessibility, which basically means how easily an attitude comes to mind,
Yeah.
in a specific situation. Attitudes that are like right there at the front of your thoughts, the ones that just pop up when you're making decisions, those tend to have a much bigger influence on your behavior.
So it's not just about how strong the attitude is, but also how, like, available it is in your mind. Kind of like a mental shortcut almost.
Precisely. And then, of course, there's the whole situational context. Sometimes those external pressures or social norms, they can actually override our personal attitudes, lead us to act in ways that, well, we might not normally choose if we were on our own.
Oh, I totally get that. Like, I'm all about environmental sustainability.
Yeah.
Super passionate about it. But if I'm at a party and everyone else is using disposable cups and plates, I'm probably not going to make a big deal about it. It's almost like, this social pressure kind of outweighs my own values in that moment.
Exactly. Social influence can be incredibly powerful. Sometimes it even pushes us to act in ways that clash with our own beliefs, even our deepest ones. It reminds us that our behavior, it's often this complex mix of internal factors, our attitudes, right?
Right.
And those external factors like the social environment we're in.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack there. Seems like understanding this whole dance between attitude and behavior is, like, key to navigating all those social situations. It's like having a backstage pass to the theater of human interaction.
It is. And our source material, it gives us some really interesting insights into specific types of attitudes, ones that are super relevant for understanding how we act in those larger systems, social and political systems. Remember, political attitudes and bureaucratic attitudes.
Oh yeah, tell me more. Especially for our UPSC listeners out there, this is going to be super helpful.
Absolutely. We touched on political attitudes already, but the source goes deeper, okay? It explores how these attitudes can be completely different across cultures, across societies even. It highlights how India's democratic system, while it borrows from, those Western models, often works in its own unique ways because of India's own cultural and historical context, right? It's a good reminder that there's no, one-size-fits-all approach to democracy. What works in one place, it might not work somewhere else.
That's so fascinating. It really is all about context, huh? It shapes our attitudes, our behaviors, even how our institutions work. So what about bureaucratic attitudes then? For anyone interested in public service, I feel like this is a key area to understand.
Definitely. Our source material emphasizes that bureaucratic attitudes, they're basically the mindsets and values that shape how bureaucrats approach their work, right? And it highlights qualities like honesty, integrity, a strong commitment to the Constitution, transparency, accountability, and a solid work ethic, all essential for good governance, ethical and effective governance.
That makes sense. Those are all traits you'd hope to see in the people who hold positions of power, people who are dedicated to serving the public good, upholding the highest standards of ethical conduct.
Absolutely. And the source goes even further. It stresses how important it is for bureaucrats to have a democratic attitude, meaning they're responsive to people's needs, respect their rights, and ensure their voices are heard, right? It's about understanding that a healthy democracy, it needs its citizens to actually participate.
So it's not just about, like, blindly following the rules and procedures. It's about having that empathy, right? And understanding the people they're actually serving.
Exactly. It's about seeing people as, individuals with needs and concerns and aspirations, not just like cases to be processed, right? And this is where things get really interesting because the source actually acknowledges that sometimes these different types of attitudes, bureaucratic and democratic, they can, clash.
Oh, I can totally see that happening. What if a bureaucrat thinks a rule is totally necessary for maintaining order, right? But then it ends up creating hardship for people, or even injustice for the people it's supposed to be helping. That's like a real ethical dilemma.
It is, and that's why the source emphasizes how important it is to strike that balance, to uphold the principles of, good governance, while also being sensitive to the needs and the rights of the people. It's about navigating those tough situations with, wisdom, compassion, a deep understanding of how those policies and procedures really impact people.
That's a powerful message. It's like a reminder that being a good civil servant, a true public servant, isn't just about skills or knowledge, right? It's about having the right attitude, the moral compass to make ethical choices, even when things get challenging. It's about understanding the human side of it all, the human side of governance. This deep dive has been, like, seriously eye-opening. We've gone through the building blocks of attitudes, explored those hidden structures, and even mapped out the crazy pathways between our thoughts, feelings, and actions, right? But I'm thinking, like, how can we actually UEC all this? In the real world, I mean. Especially when it comes to tackling, complex social issues, creating a more just world, a more equitable society, thinking about all those UPSC aspirants out there. The future leaders who are, preparing to make a real difference.
That's a great question, and it's something our source material actually tackles head on. It highlights how understanding attitudes and behavior can be, like, seriously valuable for addressing all sorts of social problems. Things like poverty, gender inequality, even stuff like open defecation. These aren't just about policies and laws, right? It's about shifting those mindsets, changing those social norms.
So it's about getting to the root of the problem, not just treating the symptoms. Understanding the why behind the behavior, so to speak.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that real lasting change. Often it needs a shift in attitudes and beliefs to really take hold. And our source material has some really compelling examples of how this can actually work. It talks about the success of the Swachh Bharat mission. It went beyond just building toilets, right? It focused on changing how people thought about sanitation, about hygiene, encouraging a sense of responsibility, a collective responsibility for a cleaner India.
That's a great example. It shows how a multi-pronged approach, one that tackles both the practical stuff and the perception of the issue, can lead to some real change, sustainable change. But what about issues that are, like, more ingrained, things like prejudice and discrimination? How do you change those attitudes, the ones that are passed down through generations even?
That's where it gets even tougher, right? But our source material does offer some valuable insights. It emphasizes how important education is and information dissemination as powerful tools for, challenging stereotypes and those negative biases. It's about giving people accurate info, right? Exposing them to different viewpoints and encouraging them to think critically about their beliefs.
So it's about opening minds then, fostering that sense of empathy, helping people see beyond those ingrained categories and stereotypes.
Exactly. And the source material also highlights the power of intergroup contact, creating opportunities for people from different backgrounds to, interact, to collaborate, to actually build relationships. It's about breaking down those walls of separation, right? Fostering understanding, respect, maybe even friendship across those, perceived divides.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's about replacing that fear, that suspicion with, like, familiarity, shared experiences, But I'm also thinking about individual identity. Where does that fit in when it comes to creating a more inclusive and equitable society?
That's another fascinating point the source brings up. It suggests that, promoting individual identity rather than just focusing on group identity can actually be a powerful way to combat prejudice and discrimination. It's about encouraging folks to see each other as, unique individuals, not just as representatives of a particular group. It's about celebrating diversity while also remembering that, hey, we all share this human experience.
That is a powerful idea.
Yeah.
Shifting from us versus them to a more inclusive we. Recognizing that, hey, we're all in this together. But, like, how do we translate all this, these insights about attitude and behavior, into better governance? How do we make sure the people in power, they're not just, competent, but also ethical, compassionate, and actually dedicated to serving the people?
That's the big question, isn't it? And our source, it dives right in. It argues that ethical governance, it's not just about rules and regulations, okay? It's about fostering the right attitudes and behaviors within the system itself. It's about promoting those qualities we talked about. Honesty, integrity, transparency, accountability, all those essential ingredients for building trust, right? And making sure that power is used responsibly, ethically.
And don't forget empathy. We talked about it as a key moral attitude.
Yeah.
But it sounds like it's pretty essential for good governance, too.
Absolutely. The ability to understand people, to respond to their needs and concerns. That's, like, fundamental for any leader, any administrator, really, whether they're working on a national, regional, or even local level.
So it's about moving beyond that traditional top-down way of looking at things, embracing a more, like, human-centered approach, recognizing that power actually comes from the people. And that those in authority, well, they're accountable to the people they serve.
Exactly. It's about understanding that effective governance, it's not just about, efficiency. It's not just about order. It's about empathy. It's about compassion. And a genuine commitment to creating a more just world for everyone.
Wow, we've covered so much ground today. We started with the ABCs of attitude, Round Rolla Sutra Group. Then we got into the complexities of, how attitudes and behaviors are connected. We looked at all those different types of attitudes and how understanding all this stuff can help us, right? Help us navigate those social situations, address all those social problems we talked about, and even create a more ethical, more effective system of, governance. This has been a truly fascinating deep dive.
It really has. And, I think one of the most important things we've learned, Jeff, is that even though attitudes can feel like really deeply ingrained, step past, they can change, they can evolve, they can transform. It takes effort, of course. It takes awareness.
Yeah.
And it takes that willingness to, challenge our own beliefs and biases. But it is possible. It's possible to shift things in a positive direction, Dave, both for ourselves and indeed for society as a whole.
Absolutely. We really do have the power to shape our own attitudes and in turn, to shape the world around us. Hopefully this deep dive has given you some valuable insights into how all this works, right? The dynamics of attitude and behavior in human society. And, maybe these insights can empower you to make more informed choices, to and engage in more meaningful conversations. Hey, maybe even inspire some positive change in your own communities. A huge thank you to our expert for guiding us through all this. And to all of you listening, thank you for joining us on this journey of discovery. If you want to explore even more, we've got links to the source material in the show notes, so check those out. Until next time, keep those minds curious and keep diving deep.